Hi, good evening, everybody. So we are on to 2 Samuel chapter 16 today. At the end of last lesson, we saw that David was leaving Jerusalem and he arrived at Mount of Olives and met his good friend Hushai. And Hushai took a very non-complimentary, what seems like an uncomplimentary remark of David to say that if you go with me, you will be a burden to me. So he took it without offense. And in fact, he was willing to contribute to David's part of the rebellion of Absalom by being involved to be his support to counter the advice of Ahithophel, the advisor on Absalom's side. So Hushai arrived at the right time to meet Absalom, right? I do wavy line means unstable connection. Huh? So Hushai arrived at the right time to meet Absalom in Jerusalem to play his part in the civil war where brothers are fighting each other. And because he chose to focus right, he was a man on an important mission. That was how I ended last lesson. So let's today go on to chapter 16. Can somebody unmute for us and read chapter 16, the first 4 verses? Just the first 4 verses first on David's meeting with Ziba.
Gary, 2 Samuel chapter 16. When David had gone a little beyond the summit of Mount of Olives, Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth was waiting there for him. He had 2 donkeys loaded with 200 loaves of bread, 100 clusters of raisins, 100 bunches of summer fruits, and a wineskin full of wine. What are these for? The king asked Ziba. Ziba replied, the donkeys are for the king's people to ride on, and the bread and the summer fruit are for the young men to eat. The wine is for those who become exhausted in the wilderness. And where is Mephibosheth, Saul's grandson? The king asked him. He stayed in Jerusalem, Ziba replied. He said, today I will get back the kingdom of my grandfather Saul. In that case, the king told Ziba, I give you everything Mephibosheth owes. I bow before you, Ziba replied. May I always be pleasing to you, my lord the king.
Thank you. Okay, so David on his way, this time he meets Ziba, and basically at this point of his journey, he had 2 unhelpful encounters with representatives of Saul's family. Yeah, and first was Ziba. Ziba came to meet David and David's men with refreshments. Okay, and you see that he had a string of donkeys with bread and raisins and figs and wine. And we see that whether it was a tactical gesture to gain David's favor or trust, he showed thoughtfulness. Okay, whether there was a tactic that he was playing or just plain simple being thoughtful, he brought food and drink for David and his men. And so we can see that people show care for others in their need. And this could be in a physical form, like in this case, food and drink, could be care for people's emotional need or other form. These are thoughtful people. And of course, it is best if it is with good intention rather than a personal motive. Thoughtfulness for good intention with a good personal motive is really pleasing to the Lord. God is pleased when we attend to the well-being of people and refresh the weary, especially those who are also emotionally down and discouraged. Okay, that is part of how we can be servants of God. We can be helpful. And it lifts our spirits when we feel that people care in our down times. So this was a welcome sight for David when he met Ziba, who was the steward of Mephibosheth. And we must also differentiate between lifting people's spirits to show that we care for them, but not necessarily that we support them if they are down because they're suffering for doing wrong. So this is something to differentiate. Huh? It's always good to lift people up to show we care, but when we lift, we are not saying that we support them because they are suffering for doing wrong. Yeah. And if people are down because of possible sin, we support them as people of value to God, people of value to us, to care for and show concern to, but not to condone or support or agree to their sin or their wrong. So that's something that we need to be clear about, and not just assume that, okay, we support everybody who is right or wrong, and it means we are supporting their wrong cause as well. Okay, of course, here David is not on the wrong cause, but it's a caution to remind ourselves. Then Ziba also showed himself a steward who took advantage of this moment of upheaval in Jerusalem. There was trouble going on, and he took advantage of this trouble to abandon and betray his master's grandson. When the king asked, "Where's your master's grandson?" So he shows us a group of people who are steady and dependable when situations are normal and stable. Yeah, when situations are normal and good, but these people will exploit situations and people when times are troubled, when times are shaky. You know, there are people who are dependable all the time, but there are people who are dependable until crisis hits. And you see the upheaval of the present time gave Ziba the opening to put Mephibosheth in a bad light. And we can compare Mephibosheth's account in chapter 19, verse 24. FF means onward. Yeah, there's a whole little event there that tells us from Mephibosheth's point of view. But in this particular case here, at this point in time, Mephibosheth was not there. So it was not possible or practical. Actually, you would think about it, that Mephibosheth could imagine Saul's kingdom being restored to him as Ziba suggested. You know, Ziba said Mephibosheth's thinking is, oh, I stay in Jerusalem because today the house of Israel will give me back my grandfather's kingdom. That is quite impossible. Even if Mephibosheth should be imagining such things, because what's happening now is due to Absalom's rebellion. And Absalom was rebelling for himself. He was not rebelling to restore Saul's kingdom. So this excuse here is actually quite impossible, quite or highly unlikely. And so the king, when he told Ziba, all that belonged to Mephibosheth is now yours, David was obviously not thinking clearly, not clearly and objectively, to fall for Ziba's claim about Mephibosheth. Yeah. Now, even though he was not in a situation to investigate the truth, he believed Ziba's charge without probing into it, without even asking questions. And you see that his response to Ziba was he gave all the properties of Mephibosheth to Ziba. So we can learn the lesson. We have to avoid being hasty to accept someone's condemnation of another person, especially when the accuser may benefit from the other person's downfall. Avoid being hasty to accept a person's condemnation, especially when the accuser may benefit or profit from the other person's downfall. In the unideal situation of fleeing, like in this case, David could not and he did not check Ziba's comments. But we can see that crisis can cause a person's emotions and thinking to be clouded. You know, when troubles, when something that really disturbs and troubles us happens, our emotions and our thinking, our logic can be clouded, and there could be times when we are easily deceived and make poor decisions that we may regret later. Yeah, so the truth about us people is when we feel emotionally down and distracted by a matter that disturbs us, what happens? We tend to be vulnerable. We tend to be vulnerable to think, to feel, and not make good decisions as usual. And that's where we must be conscious. You know, we must be able to catch ourselves, be conscious of our emotional and mental state when going through a period or situation of upheaval. Yeah, when something disturbs us quite seriously, like what's happening with David in this case. And it's necessary to be extra careful how we deal with our emotions, how we handle the situations we face. Okay, because later on, what happens is, later on, David would have a chance to hear Mephibosheth's story. And that was when he revised his hasty judgment that he made here to give all the properties to Ziba. So we have this first encounter of David with somebody representing Saul's side. And then we have another second encounter, a very unpleasant one. Can somebody read for us from chapter 16, verse 5 to 14? And after we've gone through this, we'll take a break for any questions or discussion. 5 to 14, please, somebody.
Okay, I read. As King David approached Bahurim, a man from the same clan as Saul's family came out from there. His name was Shimei, son of Gera, and he cursed as he came out. He pelted David and all the king's officials with stones, though all the troops and the special guard were on David's right and left. As he cursed, Shimei said, get out, you man of blood, you scoundrel. The Lord has repaid you for all the blood you shed in the household of Saul. In those places you have reigned. The Lord has handed the kingdom over to your son Absalom. You have come to reign because you are a man of blood. Verse 9. Then Abishai, son of Zeruiah, said to the king, why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over and cut off his head. But the king said, what do you and I have in common, you sons of Zeruiah? If he is cursing because the Lord said to him, curse David, who can ask, why do you do this? David then said to Abishai and all his officials, my son, who is of my own flesh, is trying to take my life. How much more than this Benjamite? Leave him alone. Let him curse, for the Lord has told him to. It may be that the Lord will see my distress and repay me good for the cursing I am receiving today. Verse 13, so David and his men continued along the road while Shimei was going along the hillside opposite him, cursing as he went and throwing stones at him and showering him with dirt. The king and all the people with him arrived at their destination exhausted, and there he refreshed himself.
Thank you, Robert. All right, so we see King David approaching Bahurim, and a man from the same clan as Saul's family came up from there, Shimei, son of Jerah, and he came up cursing. Wow, that's very strong, huh? Right? With the first impression you get of a man that you meet is all this terrible words of curse, and then throwing stones, pelting David, and all the troops and all the soldiers, all the guards were on David's left and right, so he was just throwing stones at them. And then he cursed, get out, you man of blood, and calls David a scoundrel and says, God has repaid you for bloodshed in the household of Saul, that you, in whose place you reign, and God has handed your kingdom over to your son. You have come to ruin because you are a man of blood. So he's thinking that David deserved his judgment, or is going through all this trouble now because he killed people from Saul's household. Yeah, the Lord has repaid you for all the blood you shed in the household of Saul. So he actually showed that he did not know the truth. You see, he did not know the truth. Now, what are the lessons and significance we can pick up from here? What David was concerned about happened. You know, he was very careful actually when he was waiting to take over the throne after Saul died, but he was accused of getting rid of members of Saul's household, probably including Abner and Ishbosheth, and also perhaps some of Saul's family members in chapter 21 over the incident of the Gibeonites. I didn't put that down, okay? The incident of the Gibeonites would come in chapter 21, where some of Saul's sons died. So David is now accused of shedding blood from the Saulite family. Now, Shimei represents all those people who resent the loss of the throne from the Benjamite clan of Saul. It's like your party lost the government, you know, and the government is taken over by another party. Now you're not happy with the fact that your party has lost. So you hold animosity against this present ruling party, something like that. Okay, so he represents all those who resent the loss of the throne because we are the Benjamite clan. How can we lose it to you? Okay, and he refused to see David's rise to power as Adonai's appointment. See, so there are people who are willing to just ignore God and interpret things the way they like. But now he can interpret the situation as God's judgment. You see, so it is really contradictory. Okay, he failed to see that David's kingship was actually Adonai's appointment, but then David's bad situation is God's judgment. So you can see how, you know, people can be very conflicting, inconsistent with the way they view things. So he saw the situation as God's judgment of David because he murdered people to usurp the throne from Shimei's Benjamite tribe. But the reality is he knew nothing about David's sin against Uriah the Hittite. He didn't know that David was suffering because of a different sin, not the sin against Saul's tribe and family. We can see that Shimei was a person with negative emotions and personal issues. Due to his personal loyalties, and that's what people may have. People may have personal loyalties against personal loyalties, and therefore when they view other things and other people, they have all these negative emotions and their own personal issues. And we see that Shimei took the opportunity to vent his frustrations and accusations when David, the person he was upset with, was cast down and vulnerable. Yeah, he took this chance. Now that David is down and out, it's time to attack him. And literally he did it with stones as well as with accusations. And people like Shimei think that they are in a higher position to look down on and voice their judgment on the person they have issues with. So they mount a high horse that now I am in a safe position to, that I will not be victimized or bullied by you. So it's now my turn to criticize you. That's what Shimei is doing. People like that would do this kind of thing. And we see they use God's name. They use God's name. The Lord has repaid you. The Lord has handed over the kingdom. So they use God's name when they interpret and when they judge other people's situation harshly with their own inaccurate standards and opinions of why people are in that plight. In other words, they use God's name when they project their own conclusions and judgments, which are likely wrong, as it happens in this case, on the people that they don't like and they find fault with. So we can see all kinds of people, and at this point of David's down moment in that sense, this is how somebody takes advantage of his down situation to just accuse and literally throw stones at him. And then we see a response from one of David's people, Abishai. Abishai, son of Zeruiah, that is the brother of Joab, the commander. So Abishai, in the typical manner of the brothers, he reacted with anger and showed his disapproval of Shimei. Say, why should this dead dog? So he calls him a dead dog. Yeah, this person is worthless, nothing, and he has no right to curse the king. And he offered to kill Shimei. And you can see that at this time, despite his own bad situation, David did not let mood dictate his response. Okay, so David can be inconsistent, but at this point, he's at least is not overboard. He did not overreact. And he was actually quite objective and rational in this situation with Shimei. And so we can ask ourselves, am I able to remain rational and objective when bad things happen to me, or someone that, the other way around, someone you dislike or have your own reason to criticize? Are you able to believe that God can bring blessing for the bad treatment you receive from others? Okay, that is David's basic response. Yeah, David's basic response. And David has 3 reasons for leaving Shimei unharmed. Doesn't want to touch Shimei. And you can see he's really very logical here. So in verse 11, right? Maybe God instructed Shimei to curse David. Verse 10. Yeah. If he's cursing because the Lord said to him, curse David, who can ask, why do you do this? So he's actually quite open that Shimei may be cursing him because God told him to. After all, this was happening as part of Adonai's judgment of David for the Bathsheba Uriah episode. That's the first reason. And the second reason is his own son. In verse 11, my own son, my own flesh and blood is trying to take my life. And this Benjamite is a total stranger. And somehow he's on the camp that doesn't like me. You know? So if David's own son was rebelling, it's not surprising that someone from Saul's connection should have strong sentiments against him. So it sounds very logical. And the third one is submitting to Shimei's indignities may lead Adonai to bless him for what he's going through. So he looks at it as a positive side that God may see his distress and repay him with good for the cursing he's receiving today. And so even in this bleak moment, David hoped for divine mercy. Just like in chapter 12, when his baby by Bathsheba was dying, he fasted for the baby dying because he hoped for divine mercy from God. Okay, so in verse 13, we see end of episode with Shimei. So David went along the road while this guy was still opposite him, cursing, throwing stones and throwing dirt at him. And we see in verse 14 that finally the king and all the people with him arrived at their destination exhausted. And there he refreshed himself. So something to look forward to. Reaching destination, yes, tired, but there's a chance to refresh. And so what can we see? Tough situations can be harder to bear on our emotions. Tough situations can be harder to bear on our emotions. When critics accuse and throw stones figuratively, and even in this case, literally throw stones. Such people that we meet, they make the process of life's journey more exhausting and draining. It's really very tiring in real life having to handle people like that who are attacking you, very emotionally draining. And Shimei was ignorant of the true reasons. So here is the guy who thinks he knows, who knows what's happening. But he's actually ignorant of the true reasons for what David was going through. But he had his own personal issues and reasons for attacking David. You see, so we could actually be playing God in that sense, imposing or superposing our own personal criticisms and judgments on people. But we need to deal with our own issues and not project our own opinions and judgment on the troubles of others, on the troubles that others are going through. Yeah, don't look at other people's troubles as a chance for us to criticize and make comments, negative comments, because it shows we have our own issues and we should reserve our own opinions to self-reflect if we have all these negative things going on inside us. If we cannot be a source of comfort and strength, the least we can do is be quiet and not throw stones or make judgments of others or unhelpful comments or advice that are wise in our own eyes. You know what just came to my mind? Similar to Job's friends. See, at the beginning of the story, when Job was suffering and his friends came to visit him, they all were appalled and they all kept quiet. That was very good. That was very good because Job appreciated their presence and their company in his suffering. But when they started talking and accusing him, they really stirred him up. Not in a nice way, stirred him up, then accusing him of something similar to Shimei here in this case. So I'm saying if we cannot be a source of strength and comfort, the least we can do is be quiet and not make all the unnecessary judgments and comments and advice. And we see that David was exhausted from his journey, but he was able to receive refreshing at the end of it. See, exhausted, but able to refresh. And instead of continuing to brood and to continue to lay low in his emotions. Now, life does not stand still in our low and helpless emotional states. Here's something we need to remember. Okay, just because we are feeling down, we're going through some hardships, doesn't mean life stands still. We still have to face up to and deal with the unpleasant situations and matters we must handle. Okay, so this is the practical part. Still have to face up with things to handle, and draw strength from God. And best if we have the strength of faithful people to tap on as well. Okay, so this is life, that we have our lows, we have our ups and downs, we have our especially low and especially helpless emotional states. And drawing strength is very important. Okay, so we see that David in his journey during this period of time, he met and he interacted with various people as he fled from Jerusalem. In our own journey through life at various times, we also meet people in our life, in our path. People cross our path. And we see that in the midst of David's troubles, when he was pursued and evicted from his throne, we see friends, we see critics, and we see those with ambitions. Surface. It takes all kinds of characters to pop up, especially when we are no threat. When we are no threat to people, a lot of the different kinds of characters pop up. When we are no threat, and also when we are no benefit, when we're no benefit to people, those that are truly not sincere also pop up. In our troubles, when we are cast down and certain people have no reason to put on a mask on how they feel about or how they feel toward us, we get to see what people are like. Some of them are prepared to unmask and show us what they have to say. And we see some people that David met, okay, and these are some. Ittai, recall Ittai? Put him purple. Ittai with his fellow Hittites. They were foreigners. They joined David, but they were loyal and devoted outsiders. In chapter 15, verse 19 to 22, we saw that David invited him to stay neutral, not to be involved and have to go on the run as a fugitive with David. But Ittai showed his loyalty, that wherever the king is, there we will be found. Yeah, we are prepared to die with the king if necessary. And then we have Zadok, the priest. And he stayed in Jerusalem to maintain worship. He brought the ark of God back and to provide intelligence for David. And here is the godly supporter, the priest of God who supports the rightful king. He has not defected over to the king's son. And then we also have Hushai the Archite. And Hushai the Archite was a calm and loyal advisor. He didn't take offense at David's words that he will be a burden if he went with David. He didn't take offense, but in fact, he saw the truth, and he was a man on a mission as a result of being very calm about the role he could play. Yeah, he was very calm about the role he could play in this civil war. And then we see Ziba. We see Ziba. I use brown for earthly person, taking advantage of Mephibosheth. He's an opportunist. He reported badly about Mephibosheth and happened to gain from it because David was not objective enough to refrain from making a poor judgment. And he slandered Mephibosheth and ended up benefiting from it. And then the fifth kind of person we see on David's journey here is Shimei, the critic or the antagonist who kept quiet because he was not in power. He was not in a position to take advantage. So he kept quiet till things went wrong with David. And that was when he started to hurl his criticism and abuse. So what kind of person are you like, or have you been? What kind of person are you now? Has there been a transition, a change? And what wisdom have you learned to be a better person You know, instead of talking about other people, what wisdom have you learned to be a better, to be and actually become a better person? So practical aspect of changing ourselves rather than what other people should be changing to. What are you making of yourself as a follower of Christ? Okay, so we can stop here. Halfway through the lesson, questions, any discussion, or a break? Anybody needs a break? Okay, gather your thoughts.
We seen like the other tribe, but it's Akkad and what you call it, the Gittites. So I never heard of them the first time. What are they actually?
Oh, they're from different tribes or different races. Like the Gittites are actually the people from Gath. The Philistines, Ittai was a Philistine. So you can see that David actually made friends from his enemy race, the Philistines. No, the Israelites have always been fighting the Philistines, but here David made friends out of certain Philistines. So not everybody from the enemy, so-called enemy race or enemy country, not everybody is our enemy. We can actually make friends of those people. And of course, Hushai is an Arkite, which means, I don't know whether it's Ak or something, some other clan. Usually there are clan names because the clans come from the name of the founder.
When you are in a similar situation as David, how can you tell the difference between a Hushai and a Zadok and a Shimei? Because you are so involved in it, right? You are crying. You are no longer rational. So it is important to have a, let's say, like a fellowship, a circle of friends whom you have already grown up with over many years. Then they can help encourage you. And you can then tell the difference between a Shimei and a Hushai and Ittai, because that's what we all need. I'm just, giving this because there will be times when you are in a situation where people are throwing stones at you because of things that you did. And we all have issues, And so it is good that there is this kind of Bible study fellowship where you begin to know each other and you begin to be encouraged, because you do need people to tell you, to speak the truth in love.
And there are, besides people who grow up with you, there are also people whom you meet along the way when you're much older, like Ittai. Ittai is totally from Philistines. Yeah, so there are those good friends that we meet when we are much older, and they can be just as loyal as well.
Actually,
Yeah, so it's good for all of us to be, good for us, all of us to learn to be the kind of people that we see God would approve here, whatever we have been. Okay, was there somebody who wanted to say something?
yeah, I actually have a comment. I think during bad time is a time where you can tell who your true friends are and who are the fair weather friends because of the way they treat you in the bad time. It's only during the bad time sometimes you get to know who are the people who really treat you well. I think it's easier to differentiate during bad time who are your true friend and who are the fair weather friend.
When they reveal themselves, yes.
But then you got to be careful. Is your friend a Ziba?
Well, we see whether he's taking advantage to put somebody down, where he can benefit from it. So some of these are things that will make themselves obvious. Okay, anybody else has any point of reflection, thought, or discussion? What do you think of Hushai being so calm about David's comment that you will be a burden to me if you go with me? You know, like Nipong said just now, sometimes you need somebody to speak the truth in love. David spoke the truth, you will be a burden to me. That's not very complimentary. But Hushai took it very well. And in fact, Hushai was willing to play a part by being a man on a mission, going over so-called to Absalom's side. Yeah, so other people may look at Hushai as a traitor, but actually Hushai is not a traitor. So in spite of all that we say, sometimes appearances may not be what we think they are. Right? So the best is as mentioned just now, if we have nothing to comfort and strengthen with, the least we can do is be quiet and not throw stones. Not make comments. A lot of people make comments in situations that are not necessary, and more often the comments actually stir up unhappiness in people. Yeah. So if nothing that we can say is comforting and strengthening, then rather be quiet.
I think in David's case, probably you know Hushai very well, and I think to a certain extent their bond is very strong, so he's able to take that. I think ordinary people will not be able to take that kind of where you call it criticism or remark. So obviously they are very close and probably come to the level where they're able to take each other's whether criticism or even hot talk. I think they'll be able to do that.
Generally, that is true of people, but should we stay as people like that? I think one of the most important learning points for us as people, which what Robert said is correct. Most people cannot. Many people may not be able to take David's comment that you will be a burden to me if you travel with me. Okay. Many people may not be able to take David's comments, but shouldn't as many as possible learn to view it without offense and be objective in looking for some kind of progress and, can I say, contribution that would truly be helpful. Right? Because we do know that this is a fact, what Robert has shared, that people do take offense, people do find it take. But shouldn't we change? Especially if we are people of God, shouldn't we change so that we don't take offense? As people of God, isn't it right that we should rise above such offenses? Okay, because even people criticize Jesus. Yeah, people criticize Jesus, but Jesus does not fight back. Jesus does not fight back because, oh, what you said about me or said to me is offensive. So as a people of God, can I suggest to you that if we take offense over all the little things that can happen, we will be a very offended people. Yeah, and that is what the natural person is. Yeah, the natural person in his or her old self nature will take offense at things. Should we as people in Christ with a new self continue to be the same? So this is something for us to seriously think about, and also to consider our own responses, and our own attitudes. Let's consider our responses and attitudes as God's called to be holy. And what is holy? That is different from our old self nature and what people are like as a whole. And as a people of God, we can show that we are more gracious. We're more gracious people. And we don't take offense easily, because to take offense easily shows how petty people can be, because the offense can be over the slightest little thing. Yes, where do we draw the line if we want to take offense at things, what to take offense or what not to take offense? Offense can be over the slightest things. So it's always good to take it like Hushai. Always good to take it like Hushai. A person who does not hold on to all these kinds of petty personal matters, but a person with a mission. Yeah, he puts aside all this kind of possible offenses to focus on a bigger thing, and that is a person with a mission. Okay? Put aside issues of petty things and take ourselves seriously as people with a mission, like Hushai. And he truly, because of his contribution, we will see that he did something so significant, it turned the tide of the battle, in that sense, the tide of the rebellion. Okay? So you can see what kind of thing he achieved by not being petty, but instead himself as a man with a mission, just like Jesus, man with a mission, just like Paul, a man with a mission. Okay, any final thing before we continue with verse 15 to 23?
Actually, I see this Hushai as being humble and open-minded. That's why he's able to accept a different opinion that David has.
Humble and open-minded. Okay, so it's always in the best interest to take a progressive beneficial position rather than to be angry and stay angry. Shall we continue? Okay, can somebody read for us from verse 15 to 23, please?
Okay, I'll read.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, Absalom and all the men from Israel came to Jerusalem, and Ahithophel was with him. Then Hushai the Archite, David's friend, went to Absalom and said to him, "Long live the king! Long live the king!" Absalom asked Hushai, "Is this the love you show your friend? Why didn't you go with your friend?" Hushai said to Absalom, "No, the one chosen by the Lord, by these people, and by all the men of Israel, his I will be, and I will remain with him. Furthermore, whom should I serve? Should I not serve the Son? Just as I served your father, so I will serve you." Absalom said to Ahithophel, "Give us your advice. What should we do?" Ahithophel answered, "Lie with your father's concubines, whom he left to take care of the palace. Then all Israel will hear that you have made yourself a stench in your father's nostrils, and the hands of everyone with you will be strengthened." So they pitched a tent for Absalom's son on the roof, and he lay with his father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. Now, in those days, the advice Ahithophel gave was like that of one who inquires of God. That was how both David and Absalom regarded all of Ahithophel's advice.
Thank you. Right. So we see in this section, okay, we're going to see the first part of the advice of Hushai and Ahithophel. And so Absalom entered Jerusalem with his army easily with no opposition because David and his men had already left. So in that sense, they left most of Jerusalem almost like a shell, empty of David and his supporters or the people who will fight on his side. And Ahithophel was specially mentioned here. You see in verse 15, Absalom and all the men of Israel came to Jerusalem, and Ahithophel was with them. Ahithophel was specially mentioned as the key figure in Absalom's council, Absalom's advisor, very important person. And then immediately we see Hushai going forward to greet him, "Long live the king." Now, in this encounter, we have a meeting of two separate wills. A meeting of two separate wills. We have a rebel son on one side, and we have a loyal advisor of this rebel son's father. But the rebel son did not see it. He did not see it. He did not see the truth. That's why just now I said, sometimes appearances may not be the truth. You know, when we are saying that in times of difficulty, we see who is our true friend, we see who is our loyal friend. In this case, Hushai is David's loyal friend, but he went over to so-called the enemy's side. Yeah, so not everything is so clear-cut, black and white. Okay, but what we do know as readers, looking at this from hindsight, we see that there is this two separate wills meeting. The will of the rebel son, and the will of the loyal advisor. Now, in effect, when you see that Absalom's greeted, long live the king, long live the king, his greeting does not necessarily have to be understood as acknowledging Absalom as king. So Absalom misunderstood, misread his greeting. Okay, I say that again. Absalom misunderstood and misread his greeting. Because this exchange between Absalom and Hushai is double layered. Oh, that's pretty complicated. And that's what we see double layered. Also, you remember in the case of King David when he was with the king of Gath, he was staying with the king of Gath, and it looked like he was going to fight on the side of Gath against King Saul, right? So the conversation that time was also double layered. And so here is another situation with a double layered exchange. Each person spoke and saw from the perspective he had already chosen and fixed on. Okay, I slow down for this thought. Absalom spoke and saw from his perspective. He had fixed his mind on a certain way of looking at the situation. Hushai also has fixed his mind on a certain situation. Okay, that's why I said meeting of two separate wills. Once again, we see how complex and diverging individual and personal perspectives can be. Last week we talked about perspectives, right? Very complicated whole thing of perspectives, how Absalom changed, how he looked at things, how he looked at his father, but not seeing how his father looked at him, not looking at how the father, why the father behaved certain way, why the father didn't bring him back. Not that the father didn't love him. The father missed him so much, he wished he could have gone to see him. But yet the father didn't. And when Absalom came back to Jerusalem, the father also still didn't see him for 2 years. And Absalom never tried to see things from a different perspective from himself. You see, we fix on the perspective we choose, but we don't see the perspective of somebody who is important to us in our lives. So it's very complex and diverging individual and personal perspectives. You see, and they are not seeing things in the right light, in that sense, not in the right light. So Hushai's answers to Absalom might seem as if he supported Absalom. Okay, it says, long live the king, and Absalom thinks, oh, he's greeting me, he's wishing me long life, long live the king, I'm the king. But actually, even though it seemed to support Absalom, equally, his words were supportive of David. Let's see how it could be this case, okay? When you go, Hushai, long live the king, long live the king. Hushai could seem to support Absalom, but the real king was David. Absalom was rebelling. Absalom was not king. Hushai did not specify who was referring to as king when he hailed, long live the king. So he was actually saying, long live King David. As far as you, Absalom, are concerned, I'm only looking at you, but I'm telling you, long live your father, the king. There you go. Long live your father, the rightful king. You are not king. That is, may not be the words, but that is the meaning of Hushai's long live the king. Okay, so you can see how it is double layered. He's looking at Absalom, but he's referring to David. So in verse 17, we see Absalom asked Hushai. Absalom questioned Hushai's loyal love. Now there's this word called as cassette. Depending on translator and on a person who does the spelling, translate from the Hebrew to English, it can be spelled with an H or it can be spelled with a CH, because cassette has a kind of like guttural sound, cassette. Okay, and this is actually can be translated as, you know, that song, "Thy loving kindness is better than life." Know that song? Loving kindness, okay, can be translated God's loving kindness. And here it can also be seen as loyal love. So cassette is actually a word with a lot of layers of meaning. It can be used of God to talk about an unchanging, unconditional love, a loving kindness love, but it can also be used of a human love that is not quite the same as God's unconditional divine love. Okay, but here when used as on a man, a set used on a man is, in this case, is talking about loyal love. So Absalom asked Hushai, is this the loyal love or the loyal kindness you show your friend? Why didn't you go with a friend? So you see, he thinks that Hushai was greeting him, calling him the king. Then if you're calling me the king, is this the way you show loyalty to your friend, David, my father? You see how Absalom is being sarcastic, right? And questioning, why didn't you go with your friend? Okay, so he's mocking Hushai, questioning Hushai's love and friendship for David, which Hushai, we saw earlier on, showed to David, unknown to Absalom. And Hushai actually went to meet David at Mount of Olives, but all these Absalom did not know. See, perspectives and our limited knowledge of truth, our limited knowledge of facts. So talk about perspective, same, we can talk about Shimei just now, right? He just didn't know the facts. He just had his perspective. So a lot of perspectives may not be correct. And so with the double layered exchange here, all right, a lot of things are not what they seem. So the irony of Absalom's sarcasm was lost on himself. He was being sarcastic, but he didn't realize it was ironical. He was mocking Hushai's loyal love to his friend, who was Absalom's own father, but Absalom himself was not loyal in his love to his father. You see, he's mocking a friend's love for his father, but he did not see he was not loyal in his love to his own father. So a question could be, is this the Hesed loyal love you show your father? Okay, so you see, when we are being sarcastic, when we are being negative, the irony could be that it bounces back on us. You know, the negative show or the negative evidence actually bounces back on ourselves. When we criticize people, we don't realize the irony of how we are actually bouncing back on ourselves, because it's just words. But the meaning behind the words is so deep. Now, he had allowed his experiences and his negative emotions and perceptions to rebel against his, can I add in the word loving father? Instead of seeking to understand his father, instead of seeking to resolve his own issues and draw closer to his father in solidarity, not go against the father, but grow stronger with the father. Okay. not go against the father, be stronger with the father, be stronger in his relationship with his father. So this is something good for us, all of us who are still sons and all of us who are still fathers. Okay, still a good reminder for all of us, as fathers, as sons, of course, similarly for the women's side as well. All right. Do we allow our negative experiences, emotions, and perceptions? Experiences, negative emotions, perceptions. Let me highlight these. I think they are good for us to think of. You know, instead of seeking to understand, okay, seeking to understand, seeking to resolve, seeking to draw closer. Sorry, let me use green. When sons and fathers fail to be both motivated and moved by action, moved in action, okay? Two things must be motivated, and two, don't just have it in your heart. Having in your heart does not let the other person know. There must also be action. Okay, so motivated in heart and moved in action. Very important. No use feeling the love and feeling the care and understanding in the heart, but the action does not show it. It has to be both. And very importantly is communication. Okay, so when fathers and sons fail to be motivated in heart and moved in action by listening love, here listening love, hearing love, understanding love, and accepting love. Of each other and their positions, they become divided though they are one flesh and blood. No, as Adam said in Genesis 2:23, okay, when he said about Eve, this is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. So the son is bone of the father's bones and flesh of the father's flesh. Just like Eve was taken from Adam, so the son is born out of the father as well. Okay, so they may be one flesh and one blood, but are they truly bone of the father's bone, flesh of the father's flesh, in terms of being communicative, understanding, and loving together? So if anything else, this will be a very important lesson for us, because this is not happening. That's why Absalom and David are in this situation. So verse 18, Hushai said to Absalom, "No, the one chosen by the Lord, by these people and by all the men of Israel." So he has three conditions. His I will be, and I will remain with him. Verse 19, furthermore, whom should I serve? Should I not serve the son? Just as I served your father, so I will serve you. Okay, so when Absalom was being sarcastic and critical of Hushai, you see, Hushai remained very calm. This guy took criticisms very well. All right, they took criticisms very well. He responded very carefully. So Hushai said, the one chosen by the Lord. Here's the first thing. Okay, let me highlight chosen. Okay, and then let me go back to by, sorry, no color. I should stop highlighting. Chosen, one, by the Lord. Let me use a purple for the Lord. By these people, let's use a dark blue, and by all the men of Israel. let's use okay, let's use a red, okay, for want of a better color. His I will be. So chosen by the Lord, chosen by these people, chosen by all the men of Israel. His I will be and will remain with him. So we see the loyal love or chesed of God is constant and endures forever. That's an example is found in Psalm 118, 1-4. As I was describing just now, the word chesed can be used on God. The set can be used on God with a difference when it's chesed used on relationship between men. Okay, so if you talk about the chesed love of God, it's constant and endures forever. Let's just sidetrack for a little while. Can somebody read for us Psalm 118 verses 1-4, talking about God's love?
Psalm 118, verse 1-4. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His love endures forever. Let Israel say, his love endures forever. Let the house of Aaron say, his love endures forever. Let those who fear the Lord say, his love endures forever.
Thank you. All right, so his love is constant and endures forever. It doesn't change. And so Absalom questioned Hushai's loyalty, same word, to David, his friend. Okay, your friend. Friends should stick together. Why was he not with his friend? Why are you not with your friend? Your friends. Now, Absalom did not properly understand the loyal love of friends. He did not have a Jonathan or a Hushai for his friend. So it's very sad when all of us are not friends the way God means us to be, because then all of us cannot properly understand and cannot properly be a friend who shows a loyal love of chesed, loyal love. It is often hard to be a good friend or understand loyal friendship when we have not experienced what a good friend is like from the people around us. So that's one thing. Few people have a heart in them to be a natural good friend. So there are very nice people who are really chesed people, like Forrest Gump. Unfortunately, a lot of these people who are so simple and such loyal people, they are simple and loyal because they don't have the conniving intelligence, and that's the positive side. The negative side is conniving cunning of people. Yeah, but there are few people who have a heart in them to be a natural good friend. When they are able to keep giving of themselves unconditionally because of the simplicity of godly love in their hearts. It's so touching when we come across these people like that, you know, and I hear the story, I hear the name of Forrest Gump, and I haven't seen the movie, but one day I should, you know, talking about how such a natural, authentic person. Yes. So Hushai's defection response combines a statement of divine election. Just now I said, chosen by the Lord. So let me highlight that by chosen by the Lord. I will retain the purple color that I used here, chosen by the Lord. By these people, dark blue. Personal devotion is by these people. The personal devotion of people, you know, chosen by these people. And the third one, popular support, all the men of Israel, the red one, by all the men of Israel. Okay, so Hushai's defection response combines all three elements in one sentence. He belongs to, he is loyal to, he belongs to the one chosen by divine election. By personal devotion, there are people who will be loyal and bond with him. And the popular support, there are people who vote for him. Now, again, he was not saying that this statement applied to Absalom. Again, sorry, Absalom, you don't count. The one chosen by God and the people was David all along. God knew Absalom would rebel, and that was God's judgment through Nathan, but God never chose Absalom. See, God knew Absalom would rebel, but God never chose him. It say, you rebel, yes, you rebel because I've chosen you. No, that's not what God had in mind. Hushai would be David's supporter and would remain with David. He spoke to Absalom but remained David's loyal supporter and friend. So in that sense, the personal devotion. And Hushai served David, and if necessary, he would serve David by serving Absalom. So he is serving a double purpose. Serving a double purpose. He was not being disloyal in serving David's son. The eventual transfer of allegiance from father to son was common for royal officials. So that means to say, historically, it is very common that when a king either abdicates the throne or dies, the officials serving the king continue to serve the king's son, who becomes king. That means serves the crown prince, who becomes eventually king. Okay, it's quite common for that. So Hushai has no problem with that as long as it is proper with Absalom. So he spoke the truth without having to lie. Because you see, the two of them, they speak with a double layer. So Absalom might interpret his statement wrongly to mean that Absalom was king. Yeah, Absalom might interpret his statement to mean that Absalom was king, but Hushai had simply made a statement. Hushai had simply made a statement about the king he would serve. So he was committed to the king that God chose, David. If God chose Absalom, then he would serve Absalom. But while David was king, he was still serving David by helping him to undermine Ahithophel's counsel for Absalom. Absalom was not king, he was rebelling. Okay, so you can see the exchange is double layered. From Absalom's perspective, okay, again, you see, we're talking about so much on perspective. And I realize perspective in human beings, in human relationships, is so fragile. It's so fragile. It can be easily changed, it can be easily broken, but it can be so powerful in the way it affects our lives. From Absalom's perspective, he would have thought that Hushai was hailing him king and choosing to serve him since he had stolen the hearts and he had the support of many of the people. Though Hushai meant David in his words, Absalom could easily interpret them as supporting him. See the perspective, how it can be wrong? Yeah, perspectives can be wrong. If he understood Hushai wrongly, it was because he chose to see himself as in the wrong light as king. So we can misunderstand things because of the way we choose to see things. Let me put that down. We can misunderstand things because of the way we choose to see and think. A certain matter. Okay, so in that sense, our perspective is not equal to the truth. Okay, let me put that down. Our perspective is not equal to, sorry, I don't have the symbol here. I will have to find it later on. Not equal to the truth. Our perspective is not equal to the truth. Epsilon could also be skeptical, okay? Some people will say, hey, excuse me, I don't think Epsilon is so trusting, so naive as to trust Hushai, okay? So somebody could say that. Yes, he could also be skeptical and doubtful of Hushai's true loyalty and intention to support him, at least until Hushai had proven himself to Absalom. But in any case, Hushai had chosen his words carefully and wisely. Okay, so Hushai on his part practiced no deceit. He practiced no deceit. He said what he said, and it was up to Absalom in his wrong actions, his wrong intentions to read an honest man's position. Okay, and it was a rightful position. There was nothing wrong with his position. So he was not being deceitful even in his position, in his comments. Now, if Absalom had been wise, let's say Absalom is more, how shall I say? Let's say Absalom is a person who actually, even though he's choosing the wrong way, he's actually open. It's actually open to being corrected. Okay, let's say it in that way. He's wrong, but he's open to be corrected. If he had been wise and wanted to consider honestly whether he should continue to pursue his rebellion, he should take the time to ponder if Hushai's statements could be interpreted to not be referring to him. Okay, let me highlight the not be referring to him. That God had not appointed him to be king. He had appointed himself. That he was not chosen by the people. He had manipulated the people. Right? Last week we saw that he was actually scoring points purposely to get people on his side. Even when he went to Hebron to declare himself as king, he tricked people to be present so that there was a critical mass supporting him, when actually that's not true. There were people who were there, blur sotongs, who didn't know why they were there. They didn't know that they were being used by him. So that leads a wrong but honest person who wants to check himself to know that he has taken the wrong steps of being deceitful to be king, and that is not the way or character of God. The way or character of God must be consistent, and this man has not chosen a way of honest consistency. Also to know that his perspectives were all distorted. Yeah, his perspectives were all distorted. And he needs a renewal of many things in his mind. Starting with a renewal of the mind and emotions deep inside. Something useful for us to consider: renewal of many things. The mind, the emotions, and it is deep inside. Now, what can we say about this? Human perspectives will always differ. Yeah, all of us have different perspectives and could even be layered. As long as each of us holds on to our personal choice and view to look at any matter, yeah, as long as we continue to hold to our choice and view to look at any matter, including our family and including things of God, we will continue to be subjective and find points to disagree or be diverse. Yeah, disagree or be diverse. This will continue until each and every one makes the deliberate personal decision and act of laying down self because we're all fighting for our opinions. We're all fighting for our belief system and our personal convictions because of self. And all the prides of self and attempts to fulfill self and self-esteem. That's what we are trying to do all the time when we hang on to our personal perspectives. So we need to laying down. Okay, and replace attempts to build and establish our self-worth by submitting with no more personal agenda. Yeah, we're not here to protect and to make a score, to score points. We're not here to prove ourselves right, but we're here to find out what is right, what is truth, what is God's truth. Yeah, to humbly finding God's absolute perspective. That works for the good of all, or as many as possible while on earth. It may not work for every 100% of the people, but for as many as possible while on earth. Why? It's because of the complex situations we face, because we've allowed issues that we disobeyed knowingly and unknowingly, coupled with issues we have not resolved. You know, we bury under the carpet, we ignore, we dissociate from, we don't want to be involved with, whether knowingly or unknowingly. And all these have snowballed. And when things snowball, just like balls of thread, they become entangled and complicated. That's why we cannot solve our problems and our issues, because we don't take God's absolute perspective, but we have knowingly and unknowingly done all sorts of things to mess things up. And like I said earlier before, good intentions don't always mean good solutions. We have seen that good intentions can pave the path to hell even. Yeah, right. In an earlier lesson, we have seen that good intentions can actually lead to a lot of wrong results. Okay, so the last 3 verses for this chapter, Absalom said to Ahithophel, "Give us your advice. What should we do?" Ahithophel's answer, "Lie with your father's concubines, whom he left to take care of the palace. Then all Israel will hear that you have made yourself an offense to your father's nostrils, and the hands of everyone with you will be strengthened." So they pitched a tent for Absalom on the roof, and he lay with his father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. Now in those days, the advice Ahithophel gave was like that of one who inquires of God. That's very high recognition. That was how both David and Absalom regarded all of Ahithophel's advice. Okay, this part is going to take quite a bit of discussion. So I want to ask, does anybody want to say anything or ask anything here? Because we only have 15 minutes and the next part may take quite a bit of time, even though it's just a very short section.
Yeah, interestingly, he greeted the king, long live the king, twice, right? So I was wondering whether is it a normal greeting or is he trying to emphasize or any significant to that so-called the repeated greetings?
It's probably quite normal, and you repeat for emphasis, lah.
Okay.
Repeat for emphasis. Like sometimes I say a certain thing, I repeat it because I want everybody to get it into to emphasize that point. Okay, so this section can be a bit heavy because I talk about perspectives. Like I said, perspectives can be double layered, and it can sometimes perspectives be affected by things we choose to hide or not to hide. Yeah, sometimes we have a double layer for people, but we may not realize that ourselves, we also have developed a double layer of hiding versus being open with it ourselves. So people can be very complex. Okay, if not, then I shall continue, and if I don't finish, I may repeat and elaborate more on certain point next week to round off this chapter. Okay, so Absalom asked Ahithophel, and we will see two incidents or two pieces of advice that Absalom asked for. This is the first piece of advice. And in this first piece of advice, Hushai did not interfere. Hushai did not respond to this first piece of advice. And Hushai did not interfere with Ahithophel's first piece of advice. Ahithophel's first advice was to create a total and permanent breach between father and son, so that there was no turning back for the supporters. Here's a very critical move that Ahithophel was actually suggesting: you sleep with your concubines. Now, if anyone hesitated to support Absalom in case he and the father reconciled, and then after that they end their argument and quarrel and they get back together again, if that happened and people were hesitating because of that possibility of reconciling, Absalom sleeping with the father's concubines with the full knowledge of the people of Israel would bring that situation to the point of no return. Okay, it would bring that situation to the point of no return. That's why he said, lie with your father's concubines, then all Israel will hear. So he wants it to be public enough for people to know, people to talk about it, even if they have not seen it for themselves. Okay, he wants it to be made public so that any wavering supporters would then have to make a definite decision, because it's a point of no return between father and son. The quarrel is not going to be repaired. It's not going to heal, not going to reconcile. So if that's the case, then wavering supporters will have to make a definite decision, all right? And then they have to firm up their resolve to support Absalom, and that decision would be strengthened. See, hands of everyone with you will be strengthened. It's strengthened because they have to make a final, very clear decision. No wavering and I'm not sure, I don't know whether later on father and son will reconcile or not. Then after that, all this, we take sides is not going to be good. Yeah. So their hands will be strengthened means they will have the full resolve, since the rebellion is not going to be stopped. And so with this situation, Absalom fulfilled the prophecy that God had made known to David through prophet Nathan in chapter 12, verse 11 and 12. Let's talk about this a little bit. While we know what the prophecy was about then, that time, Nathan came to David and told him, here's the prophecy that somebody close to you, we didn't mention Absalom, somebody close to you will sleep with your concubines. So we knew what the prophecy was about then, but now we know the actual circumstances surrounding how and why it happened. Because Ahithophel taught Absalom to seal and set his rebellion on a point of no return. Seal the rebellion, set it on a point of no return. So a setting of cannot reverse, set it on no reverse. God's prophecy enables us to know what would happen at a future point in time. But What leads there is played out by our motivations and the choices we actually make. How did God's prophecy happen? Yeah, this is what it's saying. The prophecy happened, but the prophecy does not tell us what is our motivation and what is the choice we made to lead to that prophecy becoming true. Because you see, prophecy is just words. Prophecy is just words. Some of us might have met people who prophesy over our lives, but not everything that they prophesy happened. Yeah, why? Because our motivations and our choices don't lead us to fulfill those, to make those prophecies happen. Okay, I say that again. Our motivations and our choices did not make those things happen. So those prophecies did not come true. But here in this case, okay, we get to see the prophecy in advance, and we get to actually see the motivations and choices made that led to that prophecy happening. So this is very important, okay? Because motivations and the choices will determine if the prophecy comes true. Is it a result of ignorance that the prophecy happened? Is it a result of mistake? Somebody made a mistake and the prophecies happened. Or is it a result of willful sin? Or is it a result of a good motive? You see, some prophecies can happen because of a good motive, but not everyone is like that. So that God is proven right by his judgment of each of us involved when we are entangled within. Let's take a look at Psalm 51 verse 4 and Romans 3:4. Psalm 51 verse 4. Anybody found it? Can you read for us?
Psalm 51, verse 4. Against you, you only, have I sinned and done what is evil in your sight. So you are right in your verdict and justified when you judged.
Thank you. Okay, so there you go, that David, in David's Psalm, when he repented after the Bathsheba incident, he says that he sinned against God and did evil in God's eyes, so that God is proved right when God speaks and when God judges. All right, so the prophecy happens in this case. So if God were to judge Absalom, if God were to judge Ahithophel, all right, for the prophecy happening, we will see that God has a right. God is proven right in his judgment because he has seen the motivation and he has seen the choices and he has seen that both are wrong. Okay, and because he has seen that both are wrong, in the later verse we will see the second advice, that God was against Absalom and Ahithophel. Okay, Romans 3:4, please.
Romans 3:4. Of course not. Even if anyone else is a liar, God is true. As the scriptures say about him, you will be proved right in what you say, and you will win your case in court.
Thank you. All right, so it's actually a quotation from here, from Psalm 51 verse 4, that God is proved right when he speaks and when he judges. Yes. Okay, so I think I will stop here because the next part, the last verse, verse 23, there's quite a lot to say and quite a lot of Bible references that we can look at on the advice that Ahithophel gave. Okay, so we will stop here for today, and we have just 3-4 minutes. Any final comment before we close in prayer.
I think personally that 10-minute break was a good one. I find more relaxing.
Oh, okay. So we
I don't know about the rest,
to
but I
do
find it's
that.
good.
At suitable point where there's a break in the story.
Yeah, I think yeah.
Okay. We can
My
do
opinion, I don't know about the rest. I can't speak for the rest.
that. Okay.
I think the discussion is also beneficial to all. At least we can share our thoughts and and encourage people to ask questions.
Okay. Let's do more of that. All right. So we'll try to find a point in the session to inject some interaction. Okay, if not, my unstable connection. Okay, so we shall close now. It's practically 9:30 already. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord, for your love. We thank you, God, your word. Your word is such a simple story, and yet it can reveal to us so much about us in our perspectives, in our way we think, in the way we act, in the way we relate, and in the way we also respond to our own relationships. And we pray, Father God, that seeing the example of Absalom and David, that you would teach us, God, to be more aware of ourselves, more aware of each other, and especially, Lord, to be more giving in the way we think about each other, so that we're not critical because we really don't understand, we don't really walk in people's shoes, and we don't have the feelings, the emotions, and the thoughts and struggles that people have in them. And so, Father, we pray, God, that each one of us will learn to be more like you in practicing grace to each other, and even grace to ourselves, so that we're not too harsh on ourselves sometimes. But Lord, that we will truly, truly allow your truths in these relationship stories to teach us more about ourselves and teach us how to be more responsive the way you would want us, in the way that we relate with each other. So we give you thanks and praise and ask for your continued revelation and guidance to speak to us personally about ourselves, about our own perspectives, about our own relationships, and about how we take a stand on these things that we can actually just let go. Because many of these things have to do with our ability to think and feel and act for what is of eternal value. And we pray this in Jesus' mighty name. Amen.